Let's get right to it. Welcome to Ticker Tidbits. Kate and Alex on the couch.
How's it going?
Got Luna behind the camera today that you can't see, but she's adorable.
Yeah, she's working the camera for us.
So today I want to talk about metabolic testing with the PNOE, how we use it, what it means, and how, specifically today, how you use your tests to guide your training.
Yes.
We chose your tests because they're numerous.
Yes, there's so many of them.
And you have a good idea of what your life is like around the testing because of how that affects your efficiency.
Yes.
So to go over first what a PNOE test is.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is a PNOE?
What is a PNOE? So the PNOE is a metabolic analyzer. You wear a backpack on your back and you put a mask on your face.
Ooh.
And you ride a bike. I have you start out really slow and I ramp you up to a point where you can't maintain my pace anymore. During the test, the analyzer is measuring the amount of oxygen you're breathing in and the carbon dioxide you're breathing out. Based on those rates and measurements, it is figuring out when you're using fat as fuel, so breathing oxygen efficiently, and when you are using carbohydrates as fuel, meaning not breathing oxygen in as efficiently, but off-gassing carbon dioxide in excess.
I see.
Yeah, it's just so fun. You are heart rate monitored during this whole thing, and then we correlate on graphs, which you'll see a bunch of.
Yeah, they'll all the graphs we're talking about will be somewhere here.
So on our graphs, and when we get into this, you'll see a heart rate, and then you will see the oxygen and fat, and the carbon dioxide and carbohydrates laid out.
So just a quick review. The yellow is fat. That is good. Purple on the graphs is carbs. Those are less good.
It depends on, right.
Well, it depends on what you want. As everything in our podcast goes, it depends. That should be the new name of the podcast.
So when we say, and I'll try to interchange this as much as I can, when we say you are burning fat, that just means you are breathing oxygen efficiently. If you think about big picture life, you obviously want to breathe. And so when I talk to athletes that come in and they're like, okay, what does this really mean? I want you to feel like you're breathing easily while you are doing your work, your training. And then it comes up to being, can you go faster? Can you lift heavier? Can you be more skilled while still breathing easily and using oxygen and burning fat? When your body burns fat as its fuel source, it's efficient, meaning you don't have to recover from that effort because you have the fat stored in your body.
Yes.
When you burn carbohydrates, you need to replenish those stores. So that would be the soreness, the fatigue, the cravings, or just general being, like done. If you think about a marathon runner, as marathon runners go, when they start to run out of energy, most of them are using carbohydrates at that point. Hit the aid station, have a banana, have a goo, something, gives them instant energy. And this is a maximal test, which we'll get into on yours, to be able to maintain that effort. It's not sustainable without fueling yourself with some other source.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so
a lot of talking.
That was so much talking, so many words. In layman's terms, what we're just looking for on these charts are more yellow, less purple.
Yeah.
So, starting back with
test number 1.
Test number 1.
This is my first ever. This was July 2018.
Oh man, so long ago.
Yeah, it was. It was a couple months into me doing ticker.
Okay.
I know right around that time was the time that I did that workout, and all the older people in class were kicking my butt, and I was dying. I was in the red the whole time, and Max was like, "Yo,
slow down.
Slow down. We need to look outside the gym and stuff like that," and decided that, like, hey, we should PNOE test.
Is that on YouTube, that interview with you?
Maybe.
Search our YouTube. We'll find it.
I know I'm somewhere on there.
It is, because we found it. So if you look on our YouTube into previous podcasts from 2018.
There's like 2. There's the one interview with just me, and then there's me on the podcast.
Yeah. Look for those on our YouTube channel about Alex starting and what made him think that perhaps ticker was for him.
This was before I was a host.
Just a
measly member.
Just a guest.
Yes, I was a guest.
You were
there
just
we
a
go.
Guest. Okay. So 2018, we have data on here. You can see that Alex does have some yellow. He did burn fat. He did use oxygen, specifically at the beginning of the test. So the first couple minutes of the test, you're on an assault bike. I start you out at 35 RPMs,
which is really, really slow.
it's like walking maybe.
Yeah.
And then we ramp up, and you can see where his heart rate in that purple chart goes all the way up to the top.
Yeah. The heart rate is the purple line.
So the numbers that we look at on these charts for measurement and for change over time are the Vo2 Max number. Now, Vo2 Max is commonly measured in lots of, I wouldn't say aggressive sports, professional sports.
Just sports in general.
Sports.
So it's an important,
It's the volume of oxygen at the peak moment of that test.
Yes.
So if you were a cyclist, you would obviously do your Vo2 Max testing on your bike, and that would be accurate for your sport. It's harder for us because we're like functional fitness athletes here.
We do many domains, many modalities of exercise.
So on the bike for you on this test this day, your Vo2 Max was 37, and that's volume of oxygen per minute per kilogram of body weight.
Something like that.
The number is all we care about. It was 37. The next number we look at is the RER, so your respiratory exchange ratio. That's that oxygen in to carbon dioxide out number. And it measures it in a ratio, and anything under 0.8 is efficient, meaning you're easily bringing in air, absorbing it, changing it to fuel. That's the fat usage.
Yeah.
Anything over 0.9 is inefficient, meaning you were bringing in oxygen, you just were also breathing out a lot of carbon dioxide, and you probably felt really good during the test, and it was fun. Anything over 1.0
that's where the pain starts.
That's stress. So that's when your body was like, this is not actually going to be sustainable for us, and you can usually only have a 1.0 reading for a short amount of time.
Yes.
Exceptions can be made where if a system, a body is super stressed out, you may throw a 1.0 reading across the whole test. And those are the people that usually are coming to us with like injuries or life stress or, something.
Yeah, we'll see that.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
It's important to talk about it. So in July, your Vo2 Max was 37. Your average RER was 0.9, so it was inefficient. And then if we look at what you burn, knowing you're inefficient, you burn 66% carbs and 34% fat.
Yes.
Which,
I mean, I think the reason I was able to burn any sort of fat there was because I was already doing a couple months of like training and at heart rate, as I think we started off when we started it was like 180 minus your age.
Yep.
And that was my guess. So
yeah.
I think, and that was pretty close, 180. So that would have been 160 beats. Training under 160 beats is where I would have been at.
Right. Your crossover point was 150 beats. So that's relative, like when you say that 160, if I look at this, crossover is where you suddenly burn a lot more carbohydrates than fat. So that's that moment where the purple goes up and the yellow comes down. Usually we see that in new athletes somewhere around that 180 minus your age point. So yours is a little bit lower.
A little bit lower, but
within that range.
Yes.
And then you didn't burn any fat over 175, which is just relevant in that.
That's where my intensity started.
Right. Can we get that changed? It was intense. It was stressful over 175.
Yes.
So we did another test in November. So that was July. So then you trained.
And, it's way prettier now.
You trained for a few months. And what did you do?
That's when I, like I said, the first test, I had my talk with Max about looking outside of the gym for health. And I started to change up my diet. I went super keto at that point. That was probably the best I've ever done with not consuming carbs.
You were motivated.
I was, yes, because I was fat in my mind.
Fair.
So I was super motivated. Didn't do any carbs. A lot of fat, a lot of protein, and retested, and it showed.
Yeah, I mean, in your training, you did a really good job.
Yeah, I was also training a lot. I think I was training 2 hours a day. That was like a really it was a summer I had the time.
And you did a lot of long aerobic efforts at that point too.
I was doing like CrossFit and GOAT every day or something like that.
So hitting a lot of time under low intensity stress effort. So in November then, so it was the end of the summer, your VO2 max was up to 50. So you went from 37 to 50, which is huge.
Yeah.
Your average RER was down to 0.78. So
Which is crazy because that was a maximal test. Like at the end of that test, I remember how much that hurt.
yeah,
And to have that average as being efficient.
as efficient as it was. You burned
77% fat.
to 23% carbs. And you didn't burn any carbs until over 151 beats, which is
That was where I crossed over
your
the last
previous
test.
crossover point. So to even have that happen, wait, what is your crossover? Did you write that? Crossover was at 173.
Yeah.
So if we look at your previous test, your no fat zone started at 175, and now your crossover is at 175.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And the thing that I noted, and you wrote on your piece of paper here, is that as soon as you did start to use carbs, you fell apart. I've
Yeah.
had similar tests to this too, where you train efficiency, but then you kind of lose that top end.
Yeah. That's going to be a theme
Right.
as we go
and
through these
there
tests.
is a benefit, depending on your goal at the moment. Like at one point, you have a huge aerobic capacity. You could do a ton of things at, efficiently using oxygen and breathing easy and carbs, or not using carbs, but fat. And if I think about it, like depending on your goal, live forever, carry on, do whatever you want, this would be phenomenal.
Yes.
But your goals are a little bit different in that you wanted to have some capacity for competition
Yes.
and high intensity efforts.
Yes.
When we have athletes come in with a profile like this, they often say how hard it is to go hard.
Oh,
Now, it
yeah.
takes them a while to get there. What was your max heart rate? Did we notice that?
It is, let me look real quick, like 180 something.
So you can get
mid
your heart
180.
rate up there.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel good.
Not
So you didn't test again for a really long time.
I
You're
did a-
like, hey, look, success. I made
So,
it.
yeah, part of it was like at this point in time, my life stress was very low.
Okay.
Like school was really easy, work wasn't too bad. I had the time to train, and then after this test, life stress started to pick up.
Okay.
I started to do school became a little bit harder, work
Yep.
became a little bit more involved, and then when I retested,
Do you remember why you wanted to retest? This is a test from June of 2019. I guess it
Yes.
wasn't that far away.
It
I was
was-
thinking we're...
It was
You
7
went-
months.
So we hit the summer again.
Yeah.
So school was over. You must have finished. And new baseline. Where are you at? Numbers on this test. Your VO2 max was 49. It was previously 50, so you hadn't lost that. But your RER, your stress measurement, was up to 0.87.
Yes.
So although the stress measurement is up, it's relative. 0.87 is still an efficient test. You still burned a lot of fat. However, it was up from previous, and we notice a whole bunch more carbs, the purple
There's a
on the
lot more
chart.
purple on that chart.
So the purple is at 61.5%, and your fat, your yellow is at 38.5%, which is still great. Like I
Yeah.
look at that, like that yellow shows your aerobic capacity. You can go for a very long time using oxygen, just more inefficiently than before.
Correct.
Your crossover is now at 143. So that's even lower than your first test.
Yes.
And you did burn carbs the entire time.
So right around this time was when school, like I said, school was starting to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, this was tested at the end of the semester, so school had picked up,
Yep.
and I wasn't in the gym as much. And when I was in the gym, because I thought I had this massive aerobic capacity, I trained a little bit more intensely.
Right.
And that you can kind of see that where the purple picks up, and I don't die right away anymore.
Which is something you may have needed to work on, and we'll see as tests come forward again that, if you wanted to be able to suffer, you would earn the right to get to that point of suffering.
Yes.
I just think that perhaps, was this when you were training just at night? A lot?
Yes, this
So
was.
we may have noticed things like, and this is a great way to take your own test and notice like, man, look at how great I am. And then you start to feel it, or you need the recovery. And if your life is, X, Y, and Z, maybe a test in between there would have guided you a little different. But just the same, at this point, you can hit that top end. What was your highest heart rate here?
I think it was still mid. Oh, I don't think I think I just hit 180.
Which is another interesting thing, that it got to be so intense. And you can see that intensity. Purple is intensity.
Yeah.
It got to be so intense you couldn't hold on nearly as long because you had to do so much more work at that point.
Yes.
So you did another test, not until, so you made it through
So then,
June all the way through to March 2020. So we didn't test in the fall. I
that
have a feeling we did a bunch of like
so we did.
other tests.
There were other tests. They weren't ramp up tests. We did a
Right.
lot of workouts with the mask on, and they weren't great, but they also weren't horrible.
Right.
And this was another point where I'm hitting my last year of school. Work was really picking up.
It's a lot of purple.
Yeah.
I remember doing this test. It was cold that day. It was March.
Yep.
And you had said you hadn't been feeling that great and your diet was not good.
Yeah,
I
my diet
remember
was
you saying
horrible.
your
That was
diet
another
not
part. My
good.
diet was atrocious at this point. I just stopped caring.
March is an interesting month. I often hit the same thing in March where most people do, right? You wake up, everyone's gung-ho in January. I'm going to get in shape for next year. And then it kind of falls off. And March is when you finally wake up and you're like, okay, I actually have to work.
See, I didn't even have that swing in January. It was literally like I'm just doing everything I can to get through school.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes. And because of that, I wasn't meal prepping. I wasn't working out. I started working. This is when I started working at the gym.
Yeah.
So I started spending a lot more time at the gym, but not working out, and I had less time to work out.
Yeah, we were really busy. You were here all morning, and then you had
I would
school,
do-
and then you had your
Yep, I
other
would do
job all
6 to
night.
10, 6 to 10 in the morning at the gym, then go right into classes, and then go right into coaching later that night. And if I trained, it would be at 9 o'clock, but then I would have to wake up at like 4:30 for morning
Yeah.
practice. It was a disaster, and it showed.
Yeah, so right here, your VO2 is 37. Interestingly, that's the same VO2 that you had back on test 1.
Yeah.
But your average RER was 1.08.
Yeah, well, it's because you can see there's
And you can see
there's
you're
no
completely
yellow
stressed.
there.
You know, you are 94% purple and 6% yellow. There was no fat. I remember around this, you did a test the very next. Oh, you did a test that wasn't a ramp up test. I'm remembering this now.
Yes.
And it was not great. We were probably testing the units.
Mm-hmm.
And then you did a ramp up test and you're like, I guess it's accurate. And that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah, this was really hard seeing this.
Yeah. It was
stupid fly.
motivating for you if I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, that really.
It was motivating in the sense that I was still in school though.
Yeah. But you did change. I remember one of the first things you changed was your diet.
Yeah. I was like, I need to go back.
Yeah. Start
need
eating
to-
clean. No more burritos.
Yeah. Burritos, man. Don't do them. They're all carbs, and then you turn all purple.
You turn purple with burritos. Burritos make you turn purple.
Yes.
Okay,
And-
so then you made it through to June.
So this is post. How do we skirt around the reason
So
I train so much? I don't
yeah.
know if we'll get
So
censored.
you ended up going home.
I went
back
home
to
for-
Ohio
yes.
for a few months. And you did a really good training.
Yeah, so I brought a bunch of equipment back home. I have, at my parents' house, I have a really nice garage. It's like
Yep.
a story and a half tall. So I can do literally everything. They were super cool with me. I told them I would clean the garage if they let me put all my gym stuff in it so that when I was gone, they'd still have a clean garage.
Parents
And-
be like,
And they were like, yep, go right ahead, clean the garage out. And I did. I was training twice a day, like 2 to 3 hours a day. Just
right,
I
because you
had
were
a
doing
row-
video content for us and
Yeah.
you had your own progressions.
Yep. This is when I started programming for myself. And I decided that, like, I knew I wasn't efficient. So I was just like, I'm going to spend so much time on this rower. Because the only thing I brought home in terms of, like, conditioning equipment was the rower.
And this was March, April, May.
It was
you
March
know,
through May.
So here, I mean, you went to Ohio. It was still cold through March and a lot of April this
Yeah.
year. So running wasn't overly an option. I know
Yeah.
you've been running a bunch lately, which we'll see. But anyway, you come back in June. Your VO2 max, actually, it's an interesting thing. If you look at that one big yellow
There's
peak
one
at the
little,
end,
yeah.
that big yellow peak shows a 70 VO2 max. We ended up using the normalized VO2 max to 55, which is still higher than historically you have ever seen. And if I look at
Yes.
that, that's a lot of yellow. And although we see purple, the first thing I notice is that purple stays low in terms of the chart where your yellow is coming up. So right now your RER is efficient again at 0.8.
Yeah.
and you were burning 45% carbs to 55% fat. That 45-55 is a number that I often tell people to shoot for on a maximal test, just because you do need to be able to tap into that higher energy system to be able to perform well. And you can see at the end, you do, after that one deep breath in, I'm going to call that one yellow like burst there, was probably a like, take a deep breath, we're going into it, it's
Yep.
gonna suck. And you can see where you were able to hold on, not incredibly long, but long enough where you had kind of dropped off on using oxygen, took a few deep breaths, managed to gather yourself and keep going.
Yeah. That
shows your crossover's at 175 at this point too, which is
the highest crossover
significant.
I've had.
Yeah.
What I've noticed about this test was like I'm not necessarily like that first test. The test number 2 in November of 2018, I was all fat
Yeah.
all the time. And I don't know, I personally like that test a little bit more for competing, I guess.
Absolutely. I was gonna say
from a competitive standpoint, from a like if you want to just live your life the best you can, we want to shoot for that test in November 18, where it's all yellow for a really long time. But I'm trying to be a little bit more. I want to be able to hit that top end and use all the fuel I have available to me.
It could be indicative of your diet a little bit too. If you're focusing only on improving your metabolic system and you're only doing long endurance efforts and sticking to a heart rate, you would see a lot more adaptation. It just shows how flexible your metabolism is. You would see that adaptation to using fat and oxygen easily. Something like this shows me that your body is primed to go at any moment. So exactly like if your training was more CrossFit oriented, functional fitness oriented, and you added in some intensity more frequently, or some threshold work more frequently than all aerobic work, I would expect to see this. Your diet might have also required some of that too.
So part of it was my diet was much more cleaned up, but for a lot of it, I was at home and while I was back home, I wasn't going to make my own meals.
Right.
Like I was just going to eat whatever my family eats, but relatively healthy. They don't eat
Obviously
like all
pretty clean.
keto.
Right.
But we eat really clean. We make dinner almost every night. We never go out. We couldn't go out.
But I remember you doing this test and you felt it was a spontaneous test. We were in a meeting and you're like, all right, let's go.
Well, yeah, because I realized I hadn't tested in a while. And I remember halfway through this test, I was super cocky, and someone was like, "Oh, looks like I think it was Max was like, looks like you're getting tired." I was like, "Oh, I never get tired."
I'm going. That very first deep breath in.
No, I think it was like right around
that one. Yeah,
here.
that one.
Yep.
Okay, so I also remember looking at this, and because you have those few deep breaths in the end, we theorized that could have been a leak in the mask.
Yes.
Which can happen. So if I think about like where you're burning fat, you're breathing oxygen, if the mask comes loose a little bit, it would let oxygen in and can flub a test like this.
Yes.
Which is always the risk because of equipment, right?
Yes. And I know like I really like saying I have a Vo2 Max to 70.
Right.
But it's also very likely that because when I get up to that range of a test, I am breathing out very, very heavily.
Right.
And there's been times where it almost feels like I'm breathing the mask off of me.
Right.
So there's a good chance it could have let oxygen. I'm going to pretend it didn't, though.
And at the same point, you did bring in a big deep breath to be able to go there. So we kind of have that normalized. So we tested again.
This was a month later.
A month later, so now we're like, all right, you're going to train it. You're going to see what that feels like. You know, you're unstoppable.
It was more, I'm going to clean up my diet even more, and I'm going to do a little bit. I'm not going to increase where I'm training at in terms of heart rate. I'm just going to keep, my thing was, for test number 5, I was keeping everything under 150, and instead of changing that and pushing it up a little bit more, I was like, I'm going to keep training under 150 as much as I can.
Right, because your happy place, where you feel the best moving was, and I know I've trained with you a lot, it seems to be like 153, 155. That's where you can run efficiently and move a lot. So test number 6, we did a month later. We did it on the deck. I recall your Vo2 Max sits at a steady 53, which is still higher than all those historically. The other ones that we did, 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all 50 or under, 49. So we're still going up on that. Your RER is still sitting at 0.8, and you can see a lot of really good yellow. You are 39% carbs, 61% yellow, fat and yellow. And I can see the same thing. So comparing this test to the last test, when we wondered about kind of like, was that test accurate? To see similar patterns across this test made me think absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, that is where your capacity sits. It's fun to see the deep breaths. I'm going to look at this and analyze it in a way of like how you handle yourself. And this is a long time. We should have made note.
These are like 15, 16 minutes long. Each of them are about the same length. They get a little bit longer in the test 4, 5, or test 5 and 6.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can kind of see this was almost hard still to pick. We have your crossover happening. You wrote in here where you're efficient, where you're inefficient, a spike, and then you fall off.
Well, looking at this, what I saw and what I noticed is that right around that big peak, that's sort of like 150-ish, 155-ish. So I was really efficient, almost no carbs up to like 155.
Which is where you spent the most of your time.
Makes sense. But then right after 156 to 165-ish, there's this little jump of purple. Mm-hmm. And that's because I don't spend like any time there. I try and like...
Everything is either under 150 for aerobic training or over 165 for threshold and
that was
anaerobic
this is when I started training with Steve once a week.
Yeah.
And when I work out with Steve, I was like 165.
Right.
And this right here, this gap right here of all yellow, almost no purple, is all at heart rate 166.
Which is
that
where
is
you
like a
sit.
minute and a half, or I don't know how much time this is. Maybe roughly a minute, just at the same heart rate. My heart rate did not go up on the bike, and I did a whole lot of work at 166.
Which is an interesting thing because, you know, one thing that, I mean, it's an old adage, the more you do something, the more you practice makes perfect, that you'll get used to it. And the body is no stranger to adaptation.
Yeah.
So, and you train a lot, so we can see changes within, this is July,
This is a month.
from June,
This
so
is
it's a month.
exactly a month.
So if we look at this, it's like, you know, because you spend a couple hours a day training and you're really good at making sure your training counts. Like you're watching your heart rate, you're wearing your chest strap. Okay, so on the screen we have a running workout that you did with the mask on just because you wanted to check in and see. And this is fun because here we have 6 tests that were ramp up on an assault bike, and how you guided your training was based on what we found on these tests.
Yes.
So then you applied this training to another modality, running,
Yes.
just to see, were you as efficient as you thought you were? Was this what you expected?
Yes and no. So first of all, what the workout is that you see here is we were doing running repeats. It was every 8 minutes, run 800 meters on the assault or on the air runner.
Okay.
And as average, so I actually did 3 rounds before I put the mask on.
Mm-hmm. And they felt really good.
They felt really good. Heart rate was like under 150.
Right.
And then I put the mask on and decided like, hey, you know, we talked about doing this with the mask on at one point. Let's actually do it now.
Right.
And heart rate was a little bit higher the last 3. So
Now, you had said that it was harder just because you had to wear the
mask was...
There is something about, like, I know when I wear it and I do a test, you have this little bit of anxiety if, like, you want it to be good.
Part of it is it sits on my nose.
Oh.
So it scrunches my nose down. I did another test yesterday, and I noticed it scrunches my nose down, and I can't breathe out of my nose.
The mechanics a little bit of it.
Yeah. But heart rate sat at like 155 here.
Yep. I see that. And I see a ton of both yellow and purple. So that's probably a pretty good 50-50 or 45-55 kind of split at 155 beats. So if I look at this, it was...
I was running 7 minutes per 800. So I was getting about a minute of rest where I would hit like... the minute of rest is where I hit that almost all purple.
Yep.
But then I was able to start off the next 800.
And that's a function of the metabolic process. Like that's expected to see that your body goes into repair in the rest. And then the idea is then in the movement, are you efficient again? And I would call this very efficient running.
Yeah.
I would also call it pretty repeatable.
Yep.
Which then you're applying to your training in this way. You haven't changed anything in how you're running and heart rate rise, right?
Not really, no.
But I also theorized, and I've done tests like this on myself, where if this is what training in motion looks like, if we take out that PNOE test and we look at the ramp-up test and we're like, I burn all fat at 155 beats. You do, But
also
across different modalities, across different skills, across different speeds, your body may give you carbohydrates to use as well, pushing you into a more inefficient reading. I bet the average RER for this was probably in the 0.8s or 0.9.
yeah, it was like 0.8 something. I can't see that
I
last
can't see
number.
that far. 0.86 or 0.89.
Yeah.
And it did end in stress. But if I look at that,
Well,
like,
the one thing is the last 400 or last 800 here. I think it was an 800. Yeah, I ran just full go.
and you see that it's not an incredible amount different.
No.
You had a bigger rest in between.
I took about almost 2 minutes of rest, which is I think why it started off with such a big
Absolutely,
spike of
because your
yellow.
body had recovered, and it's like, all right, we're recovered now, go.
Yep, and then heart rate wasn't too much higher. Heart rate I think hit 170.
Yeah, I see that.
But
Your fat started to drop off a little
fat
bit.
started to drop off, but what I liked is that there was fat the whole time.
And we would expect to see that based on that ramp up test, that you would be able to be efficient burning fat. And then you can kind of see where, oh, I do bring in those carbs over 155. So it's relative. It's just one of those like managing training around that ramp is probably, and this was how long ago? This was like 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
So if we do another test and you've had a deload week, we did deload this week. I would also expect to see your next test to be similar.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, guys. If you have questions about how to use PNOE, and these graphs to guide your training, more about how Alex has trained himself to use his metabolic efficiency to do trainings like this with the running.
Yeah. Also, check out our Instagram, our YouTube, our Facebook page, my Instagram, Alex the Intern.
All of the things, all of the
Check
links.
out all the things we are.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye, guys.